welcome to the Harborview. I'm Joe Collymore. The Hingham Bathing Beach is a great place for summer fun. While the projected opening day for the new multi-purpose bathhouse has been delayed from early summer to around Labor Day, there's still plenty of time to enjoy at this beautiful location. The Hingham Farmers Market operates from the parking lot Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. There's also a new brick walkway and the usual spectacular views of the harbor. The bathing beach is also a great place for boating, swimming, relaxing in the sunshine, having a picnic, or running along the harbor front. The end result for the bathhouse, however, will be worth the wait. Set to include a snack shop and a maritime-themed community room, complete with cedar shingles, a cupola, and a deck. The site work began some time ago, and once the modulars arrive, hopefully in late June or the first week of July, construction will take place during the rest of that month and into the first half of August. When all the work is completed, there will be an additional 34 parking spaces. The concession stand will be operated by Greg Acera, DBA Fire King Baking Company, and will be a big draw. It will be a high-class operation, Bathing Beach Trustee Chair Alan Perrault said. Retiring Superintendent Dr. Dorothy Gallo has been selected as Citizen of the Year for having served 56 years of dedicated service with the Hingham school system. A lifelong resident of the town, Gallo grew up Dorothy German as one of 8 children and attended Hingham Public Schools. She graduated with the Hingham High class of 1957 and was hired as a teacher in Hingham in 1963. Gallo retires from her superintendent position on July 31st. The past 2 Citizens of the Year were Jane Carr and Elieen McCracken. Of the 23 nominations sent to the Journal, 17 were for Gallo. Over her career, Dr. Gallo was involved in many school building projects, including an expansion of the high school, building a new middle school, and building a new turf field at the high school. Also of note, Dr. Gallo was recently appointed to the board of the Hingham Historical Society and plans to stay in town. With a near $250,000 renovation to the historic chapel, the trustees of the High Street Cemetery received a certificate of occupancy 2 weeks ago for functions and services. Unused for the last 20 years, the Whiting Memorial Chapel in Hingham has sat on the High Street Cemetery. With these renovations, the chapel will now be able to be rented for various events. The chapel was originally built in 1905 by Hingham resident Albert Whiting for his family. Among the renovations were redone floors, cleaned pews, repairs to the damaged and leaking walls, stained glass restorations, and a new heating and HVAC system were installed. The final part of the restoration is planned to be a refinishing of the front doors. The stone chapel will now have capacity for 80 people comfortably, and the trustees hope to get a small organ in the chapel fixed in the future. The project was funded by the Community Preservation Committee and the trustees of the High Street Cemetery. Our guest today is Elieen McIntyre, Chair of the Hingham Land Conservation Trust. Welcome, Elieen.
Thank you, Joe. Happy to be here.
Great to have you here. So tell me about the Hingham Land Conservation Trust and what it's all about.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to do that. The Hingham Land Conservation Trust owns 3 major publicly accessible conservation lands in the town of Hingham: Jacobs Meadow, Whortleberry Hollow, and Eel River Woods. We manage those properties, maintain them, both for their importance to the environment, but also because we have publicly accessible trails, and we like people to experience nature up close, whether it's a meadow or a woodland or something, leading to Cushing Pond, beautiful parts of Hingham. We also have an educational role in town. And so beyond the properties that we own, we work closely with the Conservation Department and other groups to educate people about the importance of the open space across Hingham. One of the things we do in that regard is this Parklands for the Public map. Many people may have seen this before. We do make it available at no charge, and we update it regularly. Most recently,
Let me hold that for you
Sure.
so I can hold that up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We updated it most recently late in 2017, and there were two things about that update that were important. One is the first time we were able to put the Laner property, now called the Laner Conservation Area, on the map because the town had decided at town meeting to acquire that important parcel.
Nice.
We also dedicated that map to a longtime board member, Kathy Reardon, who was just stepping off the board after 25 years of service to the Hingham Land Conservation Trust. So it was a real privilege to be able to honor her with that map. So we make those available. We update them at appropriate times, every 6 or 7 years, something like that. But it's been more than 35 years that this map has existed and been made available through the Land Trust. So that's one of the things that we do to help educate people about all of the open space conservation area that is around us in Hingham.
My goodness. Now, you recently had your annual meeting around thereabouts April 25.
Yep.
And tell us about that annual meeting. What were some of the new initiatives going forward?
Sure. So every year, one of the things that we do, in addition to walks and a number of other things, is an annual meeting program in the spring. And we pick a topic that relates to open space and the environment in some way. This year, we chose climate change and the impact on nature all around us. And we selected a panel of local experts from organizations like Mass Audubon and got them talking about what we can see in nature today that is impacted by climate change. So that could be birds or salt marsh changes or what's happening that's challenging for the fish, a variety of wildlife. We had someone from the Cape Wildlife and New England Wildlife Center who actually is a member of our board, Zach Mertz, who put the program together. It was a very stimulating conversation. They raised a number of issues. At the end, I asked them all to make suggestions on how we, as local residents, might assist with addressing some of the challenges that wildlife has. They all threw out lots of ideas. This recording is now available so people can view that. But for the board, coming away from that meeting, we've had now a series of our monthly meetings since that time in April, and we're talking about how we might, as an organization, think of new initiatives. We haven't decided what those are yet, but thinking of what we might do to not just help educate the town, but maybe help people do something specific. So we're looking at a couple of different ideas for what that might be. The other thing that we have coming up is our annual fall walk. So we do walks in the spring and the fall that are guided walks with local people that are experts on a particular area. And we pick conservation areas either in Hingham or in surrounding towns, whether that's Cohasset or Weymouth. Most recently, we did in the spring a walk at Triphammer Pond Conservation Area, which was, even though it was a rainy day, it was a very stimulating walk, great exercise, and we learned a lot about the history, not just of the natural area, but of all the different uses that land has had over the centuries, the various mills that have been there, et cetera. So very interesting for people who have interest in local history, who are interested in the natural surroundings and just want a good walk. And so our walks are generally an hour and a half or so. Last year, we took people out, thanks to the DCR, out to Petix Island. So DCR provided water transportation. We haven't done that in a long time, but that was a terrific event. We had to get people to sign up because we only had so many spots on the boat. So
it was very popular.
Not everyone got to go that would like to, so we'll have to try doing that again. Another rainy walk, but also of great interest because Petix has a beautiful vantage point, as you know, right off Hull, and also has really interesting history. So very stimulating time for people. So we haven't decided where the fall walk will be yet this year, but probably we'll be promoting that sometime in September. And again, as I said, free to the public. It's always on a weekend, either a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon, and we look forward to that.
How does a resident become involved and support the work of the Land Conservation Trust? And how might they perhaps bring new initiatives forward to you?
Sure. Well, I'll give you myself as an example.
Okay.
So I had retired in 2015. I knew nothing about the Hingham Land Conservation Trust, and I became aware of the Land Trust because of what they were doing to educate the town ahead of our town meeting vote about whether to acquire what was called the Laner property, now the Laner Conservation Area in Hingham. And so they invited people to take a walk and had a couple of weekends where you could choose to take a walk at the Lehner property, a guided walk. And I thought, what a terrific thing, so that people could be knowledgeable about what they were voting on, to have this done. So I went to the website. That's what we would encourage people to do today. I found out how to contact the land trust to say, I'm recently retired. I've got a rake. What would you like me to do? I also mentioned that I had communication skills as a professional background, and that was something they were actually looking for at the time. So I met with Kathy Reardon, who was then chair of the board. Next thing I knew, she had invited me to come to a board meeting and see if I might be interested in serving on the board. And that's how I got involved. So anyone who has interest, go to our website. You can read more about each of our properties. You can see our latest annual newsletter. You can look at our recordings of our last few annual meeting programs, thanks to Harbor Media, who have recorded them for us, and find out more. And then you can go and either use the contact form right on the website, or you could send us an email at info@hinghamlandtrust.org. Very simple, and one of us will get back to you quickly.
Again, that is info@hinghamlandtrust.org.
Correct. Yeah.
That's pretty good. Tell me about the yearly high school senior scholarships for the environmental studies.
Yeah, so we do one scholarship right now each year. It's for a Hingham High School student, and it is run by the high school faculty. So we don't make the selection. I should mention that the scholarship, first of all, is named for one of our early board members, Phil Swanson, who was really revered by the education system within Hingham. Because he was a teacher, but also he led a number of walks, was really a highly valued member of the board and of the community. So it's named in his honor. It's a modest stipend, and we are interested in it going to a student who has some interest in the environment that they've demonstrated through their high school career. And so this year's recipient is Dylan Dersch, and he was a member of the Green Team, did a lot of interesting things as part of that. So we're very pleased that he is the recipient. In addition to that scholarship, the board is now thinking about whether we might do some kind of a summer internship program that we would fund for a college student interested in environmental studies. And so that would not be something that we run ourselves, because we have no staff as an organization. We have a hardworking board, but many of them have day jobs. So we would partner with another organization. And probably it would be something coming out of the ideas that came out of our annual meeting about how to address challenges for wildlife, for bodies of water in the area. So we're talking with a number of organizations that we might collaborate with, where we would fund an internship and they would actually hire that intern. So that's something else we might be doing in the relatively near future.
I like that idea. I like that a lot. You know, it was interesting. I was reading just the other day, around our South Shore area, a popular event, if you will, called forest bathing, where people go for walks, so to speak, in the forest. And it's all about just taking in the full effect of the environment. I would have to think that these new conscious approaches would hopefully benefit the work of the Conservation
Sure,
Trust.
and our spring and fall walks are very, very much like that, although they are guided walks. And it sounds like this might be a little bit more passive, where you're just experiencing it quietly.
Although it is guided.
Oh, it is guided. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, our walks always have you walk for a period of time, and then you'll stop, and you'll hear something about the area, and then you'll walk on. So you have quiet times, and you have times where a guide is speaking to you. But yeah, I'm happy to hear. I had not heard of forest bathing. Very interesting. I'll have to mention that at the next board meeting.
We'll have to see what
new
we can
buzzword.
do. New collaborations as well, for sure. Yeah. Elieen, are you doing anything with scouting organizations?
Terrific question, and I'm glad you asked it. Over the years, from time to time, there's been an Eagle Scout that approached the Land Trust about a project. And there are many things in our properties and elsewhere in town that are the result of that. In some cases, it might be a land bridge over a wetland area, a bench at Whortleberry that may have been needed. But we decided to get more organized around that about a year and a half ago with a new board member who had joined us, who had a lot of scouting background. And we decided to harness that. And so he works very closely with Lonnie Fournier in the town conservation department. They come up with a list of priorities, not just on land trust properties, but many town properties that are conservation areas. And then they meet with the Boy Scout, Girl Scout, and Cub Scout leaders, present them with this list of opportunities. In some cases, a troop might take something on. A group of Girl Scouts got involved in labeling trees at Moore Brewer Park, and this had, historically they had been labeled, but the labels had all fallen off, and apparently there were some really interesting specimens there, so they worked on that. A number of the scout groups got involved either in cleanups, so restoring trails or completing a trail that needed to be completed, but also in redoing boardwalks across wetlands and making some benches. So a couple of Eagle Scout projects came out of that as well. So the Scouts have been busy in season, in the fall and in the spring, working on these projects, and we're going to continue that. So we're really happy to see the number of Scouts who've gotten involved, both boys and girls. It's great.
That is great. What else would you like to tell us about the Land Conservation Trust?
Well, it was formed as a result of people getting interested in clean air, clean water, and conservation right after Earth Day in 1970. So the group was actually formed in 1972. The interest today in the environment is different in that it's focused on climate change, but there are certainly some similarities. In the early days, they were concerned that when the group was being formed about potential development that would take over a lot of the large tracts of land still available in Hingham. The Southeast Expressway was still early in its early life, and it made the South Shore so much more accessible. So that was the concern then. Now, a lot of those tracts of land, we now in Hingham, I can proudly say 35% of the acreage in our town is open space. And that's actually a conservative calculation because it doesn't include most of the golf courses. It doesn't include the cemeteries, which are places you might walk. But that's a nice percentage of our town.
Absolutely.
And it's a combination of town-owned property, state-owned property, Wampatuck, a good example of that, and land owned by the Land Trust. And also another nonprofit, the Trustees of the Reservation, own some tracts in Hingham, notably World's End, that I live near. We have a nice footprint of open space, but people can still do more in their own lives to think about how they manage their own properties or just get more educated about what's happening that's threatening some of these open spaces, whether that might be invasive species or drought issues some years, certainly not this year, but a number of different ways where you might get involved. So for different reasons, people now more focused on climate change. But it's a similar kind of motivation that people have to, get back to nature. Remember the old Joni Mitchell song, they paved paradise and put up a parking lot? There's some of that worry with development.
Yes.
So some similarities to the 70s, but slightly different starting points.
I'm anxious to find out what your plans will be for the fall in terms of the next big event, and hopefully you'll also turn the Peddocks Island guided tour into an annual event.
Well, there's so many
great.
Beautiful and interesting places to visit. So we don't want to use one of our two walks methodically to be always the same place.
Right.
But clearly we have to get people back out there.
Yeah.
And, the DCR makes it possible to go there on your own during the season. So we've encouraged people. In fact, I put that up on Facebook when there was so many people discouraged that they couldn't make it on our walk. Once the season starts again, and we did it post-season when we did it last year. So now the season has started again. You can get out there through the DCR. So take advantage of the proximity of Peddocks Island. It's a great place.
We'll certainly do that. Elieen, it was great to have you here.
Well, thank you again,
Thank you
Joe.
very much for coming
And thanks
out.
to Harbor Media for their support.
And
really
look forward to
appreciate it.
having you back again.
Terrific. Thanks.
Our next guest is Patrick Ronan, Communications Specialist for Father Bill's in MainSpring. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you for having me, Joe. Just want to say real quick, Harbor Media, I'm a big fan. Community access television is so important, and you provide quite a service. So thank you for all you do and the team here, and for having me on to share our mission a little bit today.
Well, thank you. You know, we've had John Lanham, a service director for Father Bills, here on the show. And he gave us a great overview of the organization. But could you remind us and our viewers, again, who Father Bills and MainSpring is all about?
Sure. Father Bills and MainSpring is a nonprofit organization that serves 41 cities and towns in the South Shore, Southern Massachusetts. And our mission, in a broad sense, is to end homelessness. And we do that in a variety of ways through different services. We have homelessness prevention programs. We have emergency shelter. A lot of people know of us for our individual shelters in Quincy, Father Bill's Place, and MainSpring House in Brockton. And then a growing part of what we do is our permanent supportive housing. Right now we operate about 550 permanent supportive housing units for formerly homeless individuals, families, and veterans right here on the South Shore and in Southern Mass. A couple of those properties are in Hingham, actually. One is the Rust House for formerly homeless women, and we have the Commander Anderson House for formerly homeless veterans. So ultimately, our organization, which started over 35 years ago, and the problem of homelessness has evolved and changed over the years. But the fact of the matter is there are people struggling in our communities. There are families struggling. A lot of people think about the South Shore and the suburbs of Boston, and they may think of some of our affluent neighborhoods or the middle-class suburbs. The fact of the matter is, and the sad fact is, that there are thousands of people struggling in our neighborhoods that can't keep up with rising home prices. They're facing mental health, addiction issues, domestic violence, maybe a death in the family or a divorce, some traumatic things that can lead them to lose their housing. And as a community, thankfully, we have a lot of support from corporations and businesses that provides resources for us. And we have an incredible volunteer network that backs up our services. So we're able to provide hope and support to those people who are struggling, to make sure that nobody has to sleep outside tonight, that if you have no place to go, we're going to be there and open our doors and say, what can we do to help you? Let's get you back on your feet. Let's get you into housing. Because ultimately, housing is the best way to prevent and end homelessness. So that's a growing focus of our organization. So that's the long answer, Joe.
No, I appreciate that. And it reminded me of an experience I had not that long ago. I was on an early morning walk along Nantasket Beach in Hull. It was in the early morning hours. We're talking like 6 a.m., thereabouts. And I came across no less than 3 individuals who, just by the looks of what was in their vehicles, that they were living out of their cars, living in their cars, if you will. One even went so far as to bring out a little small camping stove and begin to prepare himself a morning meal. But just about every item that belonged to him was in the car itself. And it made me aware of the fact that, you would think that, well, gee, someone's got a car, so they really can't be too bad off. But that may very well be the last thing between them and total, complete, abject homelessness. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, that's absolutely a fair statement, and sadly something that we see on a regular basis in all the communities we serve. The fact of the matter is housing prices in this region are out of reach. There was a recent report by the National Low Income Housing Coalition that found that Massachusetts is the 3rd toughest state for affordable housing, the 3rd most expensive state for affordable housing. And we have a lot of great things. We're access to great hospitals, great schools, the coast. It's a very attractive place to live. So that's a good thing. But on the flip side, if we don't have enough affordable housing, then people who own a car and have a car payment, they have childcare and they have to pay to take their children to daycare, and then all the other expenses that come with living in this region, it's really, really tough to keep up. So if you have one bad break, if you're already living paycheck to paycheck, or if you lose your job unexpectedly, or if you have something traumatic happen in your family, that one bad break, it doesn't matter if you're already working or if you have an income, could set you back and you can be evicted. You could lose your housing, and then you will be living in your car out in the street. And I think a lot of people are surprised when they hear that like a quarter of our population that we serve, they're working. They're actively working. And there's a lot of misconceptions out there about what contributes to homelessness. And the fact of the matter is that the economy and our housing market has changed so much that it's just become harder to maintain housing, which is just tragic because, as you and I know, coming home at the end of the day and being home and feeling safe and secure, especially in the winter, if it's below freezing out, coming home and having that warm place to rest your head and a hot meal makes all the difference and provides us stability. And to lose that, or to be even at the risk of losing it, especially if you have children, it's heartbreaking. And we believe that nobody in our community should have to face a decision whether they should send their kids to daycare or fix their car or work their job, which would require, modes of transportation or job training services. There's just so many things you have to juggle to stay afloat in this area. And like I said, all it takes is one bad break to send you toward homelessness or an eviction. So that must have been a really sort of a jarring moment to experience that.
And I wish I could have said something to them, offered some information. And so just having this conversation is perhaps timely, particularly during this time of year when we see a number of our homeless people who are waking up in the early morning hours on the beach because perhaps it's one of the safer places in addition to maybe certain parks that don't close up at night. Yep. I understand that your organization is looking at as much as a 54% funding gap going forward. And so can you tell me a little bit about how far the bills goes about finding funds for the many services that you provide?
Sure. Well, thanks for bringing that up because I think it's a very important part of what we do is raise funds to help fill that funding gap. So we receive reimbursements from the state to provide our overnight emergency shelter beds. Currently, we receive funding to provide 126 beds between our Quincy shelter and our Brockton shelter, which is very helpful, and we appreciate the support from the state. But the reality is on the ground is that on a nightly basis, we're actually seeing around 230 people coming to our shelters. That's on average. This past winter, the numbers were as high as 280 people a night, and on some nights it got up to 300. So if you look at that number, 300, and we're being funded for 126, that's even higher than a 54% gap on the worst nights. And so we rely on private fundraising. We try to raise about $2 million per year to help fill that gap, to make sure that no one gets turned away at our doors, that everybody who comes to us with nowhere to stay can stay at our shelter and get a warm meal. So how do we do that? We have events like we'll talk about in a little bit, Food Fest, being held at the Hingham Shipyard on July 30th. But year round, we rely on our corporate partners, some very generous philanthropic organizations locally. And we'll name some, I'll name some in a few, I don't want to leave any out. But volunteers too. We have an amazing network of volunteers. The Hingham Congregational Church here, they do so much for us. And they've been a blessing for our mission. We're just very fortunate to have a community that cares and that steps up for their neighbors in need. So that funding gap, it is daunting when you look at the numbers, but then you see who's on our side and who's working with us, and it doesn't seem as daunting.
Which now leads us up to this big event of the year, the Food Fest.
Yeah, you're coming, right?
Oh gosh, yes, I wouldn't miss it for the world. So now, tell me what we can expect on the Food Fest, and tell us again the date.
It's Tuesday, July 30th. It starts at 6 p.m. at the Hingham Shipyard. Want to thank our event hosts. We're returning for the 5th year to the launch at Hingham Shipyard and Hingham Beer Works. They're great hosts. They do so much to make the event go smoothly. We're lucky to have them as partners. And it's just a great night. It's a Tuesday night, so it's a nice break during the work week.
Slow night too as well, right?
Yeah. Slow night. It's good for all the businesses that are involved in the restaurants because it may be, Tuesday night, maybe a little slower. So here's an opportunity. We have 35 local restaurants and food providers that are taking part in our tasting. But we have live music. We have an auction for great items like Patriots tickets and weekend getaways and just a bunch of great items that have been donated for our auction. We have a wine pull. It's just a great festive night where people come together. You can network, you can hang out with family and friends, and you're coming together for a good cause. It's great to go out and for a beautiful night out in the summer and enjoy yourself, but also knowing that you're contributing to a mission that's helping people who maybe don't have the opportunity to go to a food tasting or a food festival. That sort of makes it even a more joyous evening because we know we're there for the right reasons, and we know that the funds raised at that event are going to have a direct impact. We raise about $300,000 to $335,000 at our Food Fest event, and that is a pretty big chunk of our $2 million we raise annually. Yeah. So on this one night, our community comes together and really steps up and says to those folks who are struggling, you are not alone. We are here for you. And we hope anyone who's interested comes out. You can buy tickets at the gate, or you can go to the website, which is helpfbms.org/foodfest.
Patrick, this is the 25th annual Food Fest?
It is.
So 25 years ago, what kicked this off? I don't imagine that food fests were known to be the popular thing 25 years ago.
Yeah, 25. Is that silver anniversary?
I guess so, okay, yeah.
So it's our silver anniversary. 25 years ago, so mid-90s, much different time, way back in the Stone Age. I'm just kidding. So yeah, it was a humble beginning. It was before my time in the agency, but from what I hear, it started out in Quincy Center with a couple grills, making hamburgers and hot dogs. A few restaurants were involved. Fundraiser, much smaller organization then, and it's grown through the years as our mission has expanded. And unfortunately, as more and more people have needed services, our need to raise more funds has kept up. So the event has moved around. It was in Quincy for many years. Remember the old waterworks?
Oh, yes.
It was there, and I think Granite Links it was held. So it's definitely evolved over the years, and in the last 5 we've been in Hingham, which is great. And the number of restaurants participating, it's grown, and we have some great restaurants. I don't want to leave any out. So I'm just going to list the Hingham ones.
Right.
Almanove, Boathouse Bistro, Burton's Grill, Capital One Cafe, the Greenside Grill, Mary Lou's Coffee, Menchie's, Nona's Homemade Ice Cream, Peel Pizza, The Quarry, Sadie Mae's Cupcake Cafe, Sapa Restaurant, Smoky Stacks Barbecue, Townie Frozen Desserts, Trader Joe's Hingham, Trident Galley and Raw Bar, and of course Wahlburgers. So a lot of those restaurants are right there in the shipyard. And then some of our Hingham-based sponsors, we have Avalon Bay at Hingham Shipyard, Peabody Properties, which has the Hewitt's Landing condos, South Shore Bank, A.W. Perry, a few organizations that have locations here in Hingham. And our presenting sponsors, Bank of America, Arbella Insurance Foundation, and the United Way of Massachusetts Bay and Merrimack Valley.
That's very nice. That's an impressive array, and those are just all Hingham-based organizations, if you will.
If you want me to list all of them, we can do another hour of me reading off of a piece of paper if you'd like.
I'm sure that you'll also have them listed on your website as well.
We will list it on the website, and we'll have ads in the local newspapers and at the event as well. We'll be recognizing all of our great sponsors and vendors. So it's going to be a great night. I hope you can make it, and
looking forward to it.
Silver anniversary. We're very excited.
Tell me more about the great work that Father Bills in MainSpring is doing.
Well, I think more broadly, when people ask me and our CEO, John Yazwinski, and some of our other program staff, what is it that we do? I think what I like to say is that we're providing that support system for those who maybe don't have it in their lives. Me personally, I've been blessed in my life to have a support system, and I think a lot of people, everyone faces challenges, whether it's financially, with jobs or, just finances or relationships. Life isn't always smooth sailing. So we hit bumps in the road, and that support system is so important to be there to say, it's okay, we'll get through this. How can I help? And so Father Bilson MainSpring, we are that support system for those in our community who may otherwise feel left behind, that they may feel like their lives don't matter because of their circumstances. They may feel like they don't have any hope. And ultimately, our job is to try to provide that hope and that path forward. So if you're homeless or you're at risk of being homeless, we're going to try to help you get back on your feet, stay housed, or find new housing. And then more specifically, our programs, I'd like to highlight, because a lot of people also don't know, that we have job training and employment services. So we have a program called Work Express. So folks who are staying at our shelters, who want to go back to the workforce, and it's a path forward for them. And for the families in our program, we provide quite a bit of services to families. Last year alone, we provided emergency shelter to over 200 families, including 420 children who were homeless in our region. And we have a workforce program called Work Ready Family. And our talented staff work with those parents to try to help break some of those employment barriers, get them back to work, provide flex funding so the kids can go to summer camp, or the kids can buy some new back to school clothes. The little things that make a big difference. And then of course, the veterans in our community. Thankfully, veterans homelessness is on the decline, which is fantastic. The state and the federal government have done a great job providing resources to help reduce veteran homelessness. But last year, we still provided services to 350 veterans through a range of programs. So we have specific staff that are dedicated to helping those men and women who bravely served our country, coming back, going through a hard time, whether that's needing to stay in shelter or being connected to the VA and HUD, the Housing and Urban Development, to get the funding needed to get permanent housing. So we have a wide range of services. It's sometimes a lot to explain in a concise way, but that's why we appreciate opportunities like this to help let the public know about them.
How large is your staff, and do you ever welcome and rely on collaboration with other organizations in the community to do this type of work?
Absolutely. Our focus is on housing and preventing and ending homelessness, but there are a range of issues that we're not experts in that field, and there are services that certainly we need to partner with other organizations. The United Way of Greater Plymouth County and Massachusetts Bay and Merrimack Valley are great partners of ours. Just actually earlier today, we had an announcement in Brockton that we're joining the Renew Collaborative, which is a homelessness prevention program that took off in Boston, is expanding into the South Shore, into Southern Mass. Bank of America, Combined Jewish Philanthropies, and the United Way of Mass Bay are the funders. And that's an example of collaboration, private and public agencies coming together. The city of Brockton has been very supportive to help prevent homelessness. So that essentially will help folks, individuals and families who are about to be evicted. We're gonna get involved earlier in the process so they never have to enter a shelter. Sure. But since you brought up collaboration, I mean, the town of Hingham has been a wonderful partner. They played a very big role in the Commander Anderson House being built and providing housing to our veterans, and the Rust House, which is in Hingham Center. We need that support from the public and the private industry, but we've been very fortunate here in Hingham and beyond to get that collaborative spirit. And and Food Fest is the perfect example of collaboration at work, because we're there with all of our sponsors and other nonprofits that come, whether they're in the healthcare industry or they're in education. We're all sort of trying to served the same purpose, which was to help our neighbors. And so, a neighbor, you think of your neighbor, and if they're struggling, you want to say, what can I do to help? That's collaboration. And sometimes if it's something that we can't provide, we know who to refer them to. And same back to us. We really, really rely on that teamwork to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks.
Is there anything else that you want us to know about this great work that Father Bills in MainSpring is doing?
Well, I think the most important thing is just to thank the public and to thank all of our supporters out there. We have just such a wonderful community. And we're reminded every day with our volunteer groups and when we start taking sponsorships for Food Fest, how lucky we are to live in a community where people care about our neighbors who are struggling. So I think sometimes when people think about an issue as complex as homelessness, it's easy to feel defeated. Or you're like, oh, well, this has existed for decades or centuries. How can we ever really end homelessness? Is there anything I can really do? And the answer is yes, there is something you can do. And your support, your time, your effort makes a real difference in people's lives. If people want to learn more about how they can help Father Bills in MainSpring, we have a lot of different opportunities: volunteer, in-kind donations, financial donations, even buying a ticket to Food Fest. You might come out for a night and learn a little bit about our organization, but that one ticket purchase is going to make a difference because every dollar counts. And so definitely check out our website, check out our volunteer opportunities. And another thing I always like to say, and you do a great job of it here at Harbor Media, is educate your neighbors about it. And if you're ever in a conversation, whether it's at the dinner table, whether you're meeting with friends, hanging out this weekend, and issues come up about, the economy or affordable housing, let them know what you heard on Harbor Media about Father Bills in MainSpring and about, the real struggles that are happening in our communities. So word of mouth, and certainly you can visit our social media. We have a Facebook and Twitter and Instagram account. So if you can't share word of mouth, go ahead and share our social media posts. That's another way you can contribute too. So we just really appreciate folks who are invested in their community, and it inspires us every day to keep doing the work we're doing.
Patrick, this is great having you here today. I really appreciate you coming out and talking with us, and I'm going to ask you to promise that you'll come back and visit again.
I will if you'll have me, Joe. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you. I appreciate it.